September 14, 2025, 2:45 a.m., North Minneapolis. A mother posts on Facebook, "He's stalking me and the police ain't doing anything." 5 hours later, 7:50 a.m., her ex-husband steps from the shadows, gun raised. 10 shots. 7 ignored police calls. Now she's the fourth woman in her family murdered by a man who claimed to love her. What does it say about our society when a woman's desperate cries for help go unanswered until it's too late? If you haven't joined the Guilty Whispers community yet, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to become part of our growing family of true crime enthusiasts. Share your location in the comments below. We love seeing how our stories connect people across the world. The morning silence in North Minneapolis shattered at exactly 7:53 a.m. when the first 911 calls flooded the emergency dispatch center. Shots fired on Emerson Avenue North. Multiple gunshots. A woman is down. Within 3 minutes, squad cars from the 4th Precinct screeched to a halt outside a modest 2-story home where Teresa Renee Sanders, 34, lay motionless beside her white Ford Explorer. Blood pooled beneath her body, staining the concrete driveway a deep crimson as the morning sun cast long shadows across the scene. First responders rushed to Teresa's side, but it was immediately clear their efforts would be futile. The medical examiner would later confirm what those first officers already knew: Teresa had been shot multiple times at close range, dying almost instantly. As police secured the area with yellow crime scene tape, 15 shell casings glinted in the morning light, scattered across the pavement like macabre breadcrumbs telling the story of Teresa's final moments. Neighbors emerged from their homes, drawn by the commotion of sirens and flashing lights. Some stood in shocked silence, hands covering their mouths as they watched paramedics drape a white sheet over Teresa's body. Others huddled together in small groups, whispering among themselves, sharing what little they knew. An elderly woman clutched her bathrobe tight against the morning chill, tears streaming down her weathered face. "I heard the shots," she told a uniformed officer. "So many shots. Like fireworks, but worse. Much worse." Detective Alonso Winston arrived 20 minutes after the first officers, his experienced eyes immediately taking in details others might miss. He noted how Teresa's driver's side door stood partially open, her purse and lunch bag still clutched in her left hand. She had been heading to work, a normal Tuesday morning that had turned deadly in seconds. Jackson instructed the crime scene technicians to prioritize collecting surveillance footage from neighboring homes. In this residential area, doorbell cameras and security systems might have captured crucial evidence. "Check every angle," Jackson told his partner, Detective Aaron Kyle. Someone had to see something. His instinct proved correct. Within the hour, detectives had obtained footage from a neighbor's security camera that captured the entire incident in chilling detail. The video showed a man, later identified as Franklin Fox, 50, emerging from behind a parked car as Teresa approached her SUV. Without hesitation, he raised a handgun and fired repeatedly, continuing to shoot even as Teresa collapsed to the ground. The footage clearly showed Fox's face as he stood over Teresa's body, fired several more rounds, then calmly walked to her vehicle, removed a bicycle from the back, and pedaled away from the scene. "We've got a positive ID," Detective Thompson confirmed as they reviewed the footage at the precinct. "Franklin Fox, Teresa's ex-husband. They divorced 3 months ago." Jackson nodded grimly, his expression hardening as he studied Fox's face on the screen. "Send his information to every patrol unit in the city. I want this guy found before the sun sets." By mid-morning, Teresa's family had gathered at the crime scene. Her mother, Beatrice Sanders, 63, collapsed in grief when officers confirmed her daughter's death, her anguished wails cutting through the murmur of police radios and onlookers' conversations. Teresa's sister, Karen, 29, stood rigid with shock, her face a mask of disbelief and rage as she held her sobbing mother. "This can't be happening," Karen whispered to the victim advocate who had arrived to support the family. "Not again. Not to Teresa." When reporters arrived, Karen stepped forward, her voice breaking as she delivered a statement that would dominate local headlines by noon. Teresa is the fourth woman in our family murdered by someone who claimed to love them, she said, her eyes fierce despite her tears. My cousin Janelle in 1998. My Aunt Patricia in 2005. My other sister Destiny in 2014. And now Teresa. The system failed them all, and it failed Teresa when she begged for help. As Karen spoke, reporters were already discovering Teresa's haunting final Facebook post, published at exactly 2:45 a.m., precisely 5 hours before she was gunned down. He's stalking me at 4 in the morning and the police ain't doing anything besides serve him with a protective order and clearly it's not doing anything, Teresa had written. The post had garnered dozens of concerned comments from friends urging her to stay somewhere else, to be careful, to call the police again. Teresa never responded to any of them. It would be her last communication with the world. By noon, news of Teresa's murder had spread throughout Minneapolis, her story featured prominently on local television broadcasts and news websites. The headline, "Woman Murdered Hours After Posting About Stalker X," appeared above Teresa's smiling Facebook profile picture. A vibrant young woman with warm brown eyes and a bright smile, her hair styled in elegant box braids that framed her face. The juxtaposition of this image of life and joy against the violent reality of her death struck a chord with viewers across the city. As the investigation intensified, detectives launched a citywide search for Franklin Fox. His image was distributed to all patrol units, and his name and description were shared with neighboring jurisdictions. Detectives focused particularly on locations where Fox had been known to frequent: his mother's home in South Minneapolis, a cousin's apartment in Brooklyn Center, and several bars in North Minneapolis where he was a regular. "He's armed and dangerous," Jackson reminded officers during the afternoon briefing. "Approach with extreme caution." Meanwhile, forensic technicians processed the crime scene, meticulously documenting each shell casing's location and photographing blood spatter patterns. The trajectory analysis revealed that Franklin had first fired 5 rounds in rapid succession as Teresa turned to flee, then approached closer and fired several more times through the vehicle's door where she had attempted to seek shelter. The medical examiner would later confirm that Teresa had been struck 8 times, primarily in the torso and head. The sheer number of bullets fired spoke to the intensity of Franklin's rage. This wasn't a crime of momentary passion, the evidence pointed to premeditation and determination. Franklin had come prepared with a loaded weapon and additional ammunition. He had positioned himself strategically, waiting for the precise moment when Teresa would be most vulnerable, alone, distracted, and exposed in her driveway. As body camera footage from the responding officers was reviewed, investigators pieced together witness statements from neighbors who had heard the shots. 82-year-old Dorothy Mills, who lived directly across the street, told officers she had seen a man matching Franklin's description sitting in a dark car outside Teresa's home since at least 6:30 that morning. "I noticed because it seemed strange," Mills explained, her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. "He just sat there, not moving. I should have called someone. Maybe she'd still be alive if I had." The guilt in Mills' voice was palpable, a sentiment echoed by other neighbors who had noticed Franklin's presence in the days leading up to the murder but hadn't reported it. One neighbor, James Taylor, 47, told officers he had seen Franklin driving slowly past Teresa's house nearly every evening for the past week. "I figured it was just a domestic thing," Taylor admitted. "You know how couples are, they fight, they make up. I didn't want to get involved." When officers recovered Teresa's phone from her purse, they discovered a series of text messages sent to her sister Karen just hours before the shooting. "He's outside again," Teresa had written at 4:12 a.m. "Sitting in a dark car across the street. I called the police but by the time they got here, he was gone." At 5:37 a.m., she had sent another message, "I'm scared to leave for work. What if he's waiting for me?" Karen had responded at 6:15 a.m., "Stay inside. I'm coming to get you." But by then, Teresa had fallen back asleep after her sleepless night, missing her sister's message. When she awoke at 7:30 a.m., running late for her shift at Confidentiality, the dog grooming salon where she worked, she rushed to leave without checking her phone again. It was a simple oversight with fatal consequences, a missed message that might have saved her life. Back at the precinct, Detective Jackson pinned a timeline to the investigation board, mapping out Teresa's final 24 hours. Each entry represented a missed opportunity for intervention, a point where the trajectory of events might have been altered. But the timeline also revealed the relentless persistence of Franklin Fox, a man who simply would not stop until he achieved his deadly goal. "This is what determination looks like," Jackson said to Thompson as they studied the board. "He was going to get to her eventually. The question is whether we could have stopped him sooner." As detectives continued their investigation, they began to uncover the troubled history between Teresa and Franklin, a relationship that had begun with promise but descended into control, abuse, and ultimately, murder. Teresa Renee Sanders grew up in North Minneapolis, the middle child of 3 siblings in a close-knit family. Friends described her as vibrant and determined, someone who could light up a room with her smile and infectious laugh. After graduating from North Community High School, she had pursued her passion for animals, becoming a professional dog groomer and building a loyal clientele at Confidentiality, where she had worked for the past 7 years. "She had this gift with animals," said Megan Cobb, the salon owner. "Even the most difficult dogs would calm down when Teresa worked with them. She just had this gentleness, this patience that they responded to. Clients would specifically request her, some would wait weeks for an appointment rather than see anyone else." A single mother raising 2 boys, 11-year-old Jamal and 7-year-old Elijah, Teresa had focused primarily on creating a stable, loving home for her children. Her apartment in the Willard Hay neighborhood was modest but immaculately kept, with family photos covering the walls and her son's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. "She was all about those boys," Veronica Butler, Teresa's best friend since childhood, told investigators. "Everything she did was to give them a good life. She worked extra shifts to pay for Jamal's basketball camp last summer. She helped Elijah with his reading every night, even when she was exhausted from work. Those boys were her world." Teresa's devotion to her children was evident in every aspect of her life. She volunteered at their school, chaperoned field trips, and coached Elijah's t-ball team despite having no particular interest in sports. Neighbors recalled how she would sit on her front porch in the evenings, supervising the boys as they played with friends in the yard, calling them in at dusk for dinner and homework. "She was strict but loving," said neighbor Jalen Bones, 36. "Those boys were always clean, polite, and well-behaved. You could tell they were raised with both love and discipline." Teresa's social media accounts painted a picture of a devoted mother who shared videos of her son's basketball games, school achievements, and family outings. But scrolling back through her Facebook history, detectives found the first mention of Franklin Fox in January 2025, when Teresa posted a photo of an illuminated artificial flower with the caption, "Look what someone special sent me from Stillwater." The flower, investigators would learn, was a handcrafted gift made by inmates at Stillwater Correctional Facility, a plastic rose illuminated by small LED lights powered by a watch battery. It was the kind of creative project prisoners made to earn a small income and pass the time. For Teresa, it represented the beginning of what she believed would be a fresh start with someone who appreciated her. Franklin Fox had been serving a 15-year sentence for illegal gun possession at Stillwater Correctional Facility until his release in December 2024. Court records revealed an extensive criminal background including 3 convictions for drug offenses, 2 for aggravated robbery, and additional charges ranging from property damage to assault. While incarcerated, Franklin had begun corresponding with Teresa after being introduced through a mutual acquaintance. She was excited about him at first, Karen told detectives. He was charming in his letters and phone calls. He told her he had changed, that prison had given him time to reflect and become a better man. Karen admitted she had been skeptical from the beginning. "I told her to be careful. A man with that kind of record, it's a red flag." But Teresa always wanted to see the best in people. She believed in second chances. When Franklin was released just before Christmas 2024, Teresa had welcomed him into her life, introducing him to her sons and family. Early photos from that period showed a smiling couple, with Franklin's arm protectively around Teresa's shoulders. But looking more closely at images from March and April, detectives noticed subtle changes in Teresa's body language, a slight stiffness in her posture, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, the way she seemed to lean away from Franklin's touch. Teresa's co-workers at Perfection noticed changes as well. Franklin would show up unannounced at the salon, Megan Cobb told investigators. At first, it seemed sweet, he'd bring her lunch or flowers. But then he started questioning her about male clients, about who she talked to. He'd wait outside for her entire shift sometimes, just sitting in his car watching the door. Thomas recalled one incident in April that particularly concerned her. Teresa was working late with a walk-in client, a man with a standard poodle. Franklin came in and just stood there, staring at them. The way he was looking at this client, it was scary. I had to ask him to wait outside. After that, I started walking Teresa to her car at the end of her shifts. By May, Teresa's friends had begun noticing other worrying signs. Her typically vibrant social media presence became more subdued. She canceled plans at the last minute, often citing Franklin's unexpected change of schedule or his desire for family time that excluded her friends. When she did attend social gatherings, Franklin was always present, monitoring her conversations and interactions. It was like watching someone shrink, Veronica Butler said. Teresa had always been this confident, independent woman. But around him, she second-guessed everything, what she wore, what she said, who she talked to. She was constantly checking her phone, worried if she didn't respond to his texts right away. It was subtle at first, then more obvious as time went on. By June, Teresa's social media posts about Franklin had stopped completely. When Detective Jackson asked Karen about this, she explained that Franklin had become increasingly controlling, demanding access to Teresa's phone and accounts. He accused her of talking to other men, Karen said. He'd fly into a rage if she didn't answer his calls immediately. He started tracking her movements, questioning where she went. My sister was walking on eggshells around him. Karen described how Teresa would call her, speaking in whispers from her bathroom or car, afraid that Franklin might overhear their conversations. She'd say things like, "He threw my phone against the wall because a male client texted me about a grooming appointment," or, "He deleted all my male friends from my Facebook." The relationship deteriorated further in July, when Teresa asked Franklin to move out of her apartment. According to mutual friends interviewed by detectives, Franklin initially seemed to accept the breakup, moving into his cousin's apartment in Brooklyn Center. But his acceptance was short-lived. He couldn't stand that she was moving on, said Malcolm, who had known both Teresa and Franklin. He'd call her 50, 60 times a day. Show up at her job, her house. He'd tell everyone they were still together, that they were just going through a rough patch. Lewis recalled a particularly disturbing incident at a neighborhood barbecue in late July. Teresa was there with the kids, just trying to have a normal day. Franklin showed up uninvited. When she tried to leave, he grabbed her arm so hard it left bruises. He was saying stuff like, "You think you can just throw me away? You think you're better than me?" It took 3 of us to get him to back off. Teresa's phone records confirmed the harassment Lewis described. In the month of July alone, Franklin had called Teresa 478 times and sent over 600 text messages. The content of these messages ranged from desperate pleas for reconciliation to explicit threats and insults. "Baby, please, I'm nothing without you," read one message sent on July 14. "I can't eat, can't sleep just thinking about you. Give me one more chance." 3 days later, the tone had shifted dramatically. "You think you can just walk away? I know where you sleep. I know where your kids go to school. You belong to me." Teresa had blocked Franklin's number multiple times, but he simply used different phones or created new social media accounts to contact her. When she changed her phone number in early August, he began showing up in person instead. The situation reached a breaking point on August 21, 2025. Doorbell camera footage from Teresa's home, obtained by investigators, captured a disturbing confrontation. At 11:47 p.m., Franklin appeared on Teresa's porch, pounding on the door and shouting her name. When she opened the door, seemingly to avoid waking the neighbors, the argument quickly escalated. The video showed Franklin grabbing Teresa by the arm, dragging her onto the lawn, and striking her multiple times with what appeared to be a pistol. He then pinned her against the fence, his hand around her throat, the gun clearly visible. "I will shoot you," Franklin could be heard saying on the recording. "You and anybody else in that house. You think I'm playing?" The incident ended only when lights came on in neighboring homes and a voice called out that they were calling the police. Franklin fled before officers arrived, but Teresa was left with visible injuries, a contusion on her right temple, scratches along her arms, and bruising across her body, all documented in the subsequent medical examination. The emergency room physician who treated Teresa that night, Dr. Priya Patel, told investigators that Teresa had been terrified but also resigned, as if expecting the violence. "She told me this wasn't the first time he'd hit her," Dr. Patel said. "But it was the first time he'd used a weapon. She said he seemed different this time, colder, more calculated. She was genuinely afraid he would kill her." Dr. Patel had urged Teresa to file a police report and press charges, explaining that strangulation, which Teresa had experienced during the assault, was one of the strongest predictors of eventual homicide in domestic violence cases. "I told her that men who choke their partners are statistically much more likely to eventually kill them," Dr. Patel recalled. "I thought that information might convince her to take stronger action." The next day, August 22, Teresa filed a police report, though she initially declined to press charges, telling officers she feared retaliation. "He said he'd kill me if I went to the police," she told the responding officer. "I have my boys to think about." The officer, Lieutenant Brooks, had urged Teresa to reconsider. "I've been doing this 20 years, he told her. "I've seen too many women end up dead because they were afraid to press charges. The best protection is putting him behind bars." Despite her hesitation to pursue criminal charges, Teresa did seek legal protection. Court records showed that on August 26, she obtained an order of protection against Franklin. In her petition, Teresa wrote, "I was extremely fearful of the respondent and take his threat seriously. He has access to weapons and has threatened to use them against me. He stated he would shoot me and anyone else in my house. He pistol-whipped me and choked me against a fence while holding a gun." The order, which covered both Teresa and her 11-year-old son Jamal, prohibited Franklin from contacting Teresa or coming within 2,000 feet of her home or workplace. He was formally served with the order on August 29 while visiting his probation officer, but the legal document did little to deter his behavior. The probation officer, Omar Stewart, later told detectives that Franklin had been dismissive when served with the order. He laughed and said, "This don't mean nothing. That's my woman. She'll come around." I warned him that violating the order would send him straight back to prison, but he just shrugged it off. Text messages recovered from Teresa's phone revealed that Franklin began violating the order almost immediately. His initial messages appeared apologetic, "I'm sorry. I still have things for your birthday." And, "I love you, Teresa, and I'm truly sorry for the hurt I caused you." When Teresa didn't respond, his tone shifted dramatically, "You a fake nothing. I knew you was with that man. All this time you been lying." Teresa eventually posted screenshots of these messages on her Facebook page, writing, "This is what harassment looks like. This is what an abuser does when they lose control. I have a protection order and he's still blowing up my phone. What else am I supposed to do?" Her post received dozens of supportive comments and was shared over 100 times, bringing public attention to her situation. Several comments urged her to continue documenting everything and to report each violation to both the police and the court. Others suggested she stay with family or friends, or even leave the state temporarily. One comment, from a domestic violence survivor, was particularly prescient: protection orders only work on people who respect the law. Be careful, sis. Stay unpredictable. Change your routines. Don't go places alone. As September began, Teresa made multiple calls to police reporting that Franklin was stalking her. Records showed that between September 1st and 13th, she contacted law enforcement 7 times to report violations of the protection order. According to Veronica Butler, Teresa's fear was escalating with each incident. She would call me in tears, Veronica told detectives. She'd say, "He was outside my window last night," or "He followed me from work today." She was terrified, but she also felt trapped. She couldn't just pick up and leave. She had her job, her kids in school, her whole support system here. Teresa had begun taking precautions, varying her routes to work, asking friends to check her home before she entered, installing additional locks and security cameras. She enrolled in a self-defense class and purchased pepper spray. She had even spoken to her sons about safety plans, instructing them to go to a neighbor's house if they ever felt unsafe. She was doing everything right, Karen said, her voice breaking with frustration. Everything they tell women to do. Document the abuse. Get a protection order. Call the police. Change your patterns. She did it all, and she still ended up dead. The system is broken. Police response logs indicated that officers had been dispatched to Teresa's home 5 times in the 2 weeks before her murder, but in each instance, Franklin had already left the scene before they arrived. On 2 occasions, officers advised Teresa to document the violations and report them to the court that had issued the protection order, but no arrests were made. When Detective Jackson questioned officers about the lack of more decisive action, the responses reflected the limitations of the system. Officer Milton, who had responded to one of Teresa's calls on September 8, explained, "Without direct evidence that he was there, no video, no third-party witness, we couldn't make an arrest. She said he was there, but he was gone when we arrived." It becomes a he-said-she-said situation. Another responding officer, Lisa Rodriguez, had advised Teresa to gather more concrete evidence. "I told her to keep her phone handy to record any interactions, to save all messages, to note the dates and times of every sighting," Rodriguez recalled. "The more documentation she had, the stronger case we could build." What would you do if the system designed to protect you was failing? Would you stay and fight or flee to save your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Surveillance footage obtained from businesses along Teresa's route to work showed Franklin's vehicle following her on at least 3 different dates in early September. On September 10, camera footage from a gas station captured Franklin watching Teresa's house from across the street for over 2 hours. When detectives asked why this hadn't led to an arrest, the responding officer explained that by the time they arrived, Franklin was gone, and without direct evidence of a threat, they had limited options for immediate action. "We advised her to vary her routine, to stay with friends or family if possible," the officer stated in his report. "We told her to document everything." And document she did. Teresa's phone contained dozens of photos and videos recording Franklin's appearances near her home and workplace. She had created a detailed log of every violation of the protection order, every threatening message, every time she spotted him watching her. It was a meticulous record of escalating danger that would never reach the courts. Teresa had also reached out to domestic violence advocates at Hands of Hope Resource Center. Case manager Sabrina Wendell had been working with Teresa to develop a comprehensive safety plan. "We discussed everything from changing the locks to relocating temporarily," Moore said. She was considering moving her sons to stay with their grandmother for a while, just until the situation cooled down. "We had an appointment scheduled for September 16 to review her options. She never made it to that meeting." Moore emphasized the precarious position many domestic violence victims find themselves in. People ask, why didn't she just leave? But it's never that simple. Leaving is often the most dangerous time. Abusers see it as the ultimate loss of control, which can trigger extreme violence. Plus, there are practical considerations: housing, finances, children's schools, support networks. Teresa was trying to navigate all of that while living in constant fear. Despite the support systems Teresa had begun to access, the danger continued to escalate. On September 12, just 2 days before her murder, Franklin followed Teresa from Pawfection to a grocery store. Security footage showed him trailing her through the aisles, staying just far enough back that she didn't notice him. When she went to the parking lot, he approached her car, pounding on her window and shouting. A store security guard intervened, but Franklin fled before police arrived. The security guard, Robin Horde, told investigators, she was shaking so hard she could barely get her keys in the ignition. I stayed with her until she calmed down enough to drive. She kept saying, he's going to kill me. No one can stop him. In the early hours of September 14, the situation reached its fatal conclusion. At 2:45 a.m., unable to sleep after spotting Franklin's car driving slowly past her house, Teresa made her final Facebook posts. He's stalking me at 4 in the morning and the police ain't doing anything besides serve him with a protective order, and clearly it's not doing anything. She followed this with 2 additional posts. I'm a fake nothing coming from a broke bum who can't control his emotions and put hands on me. Threatened my family and damaged my car because he can't handle a breakup. I can't stand a human being who can't take accountability for their messed up actions. Hit, punch, slap, push, shove, whatever you want to call it. These posts, a mixture of fear and defiance, would be her last public words, a digital cry for help that went tragically unanswered. Friends would later report seeing the posts but assuming Teresa was simply venting frustration, not realizing the imminent danger she faced. At 4 a.m., Teresa texted her sister Karen, he's outside again. Parked down the street. I can see his car from my bedroom window. Karen responded immediately, call 911 right now. I'm coming over. Teresa replied, I called. They said they'll send someone. I'm scared, Karen. At 4:30 a.m., Teresa texted again, police came. He was gone when they got here. Officer said there's nothing they can do if he's not physically here. I'm so tired of this. The responding officers, Nathaniel Cooper and Rachel Hernandez, would later confirm this account. We searched the area but didn't locate anyone matching Fox's description or any vehicle registered to him, Officer Cooper stated in his report. We advised Ms. Sanders to stay inside with doors locked and to call again if he returned. Officer Hernandez added, she was clearly frightened. I suggested she consider staying elsewhere for a few days, but she said she had work in the morning and didn't want to disrupt her kids' school routine. I gave her my card and told her to call anytime, day or night. Karen urged her sister to come stay with her, but Teresa was reluctant to wake her sons in the middle of the night. I'll come in the morning after I drop the boys at school, she promised. Just a few days until the court hearing on Monday. Teresa had scheduled a hearing for September 18 to request that the court take stronger action regarding the protection order violations. She had gathered extensive evidence, photos, videos, text messages, witness statements, all documenting Franklin's persistent harassment. She had hoped that this evidence would result in his arrest and imprisonment for violating both the protection order and the terms of his probation. She was just 4 days short of that hearing when Franklin took her life. By 7 a.m., Teresa was going through her morning routine, preparing her sons for school and herself for work. According to her neighbor Dorothy Mills, the boys left for school at 7:30 a.m., catching their bus at the corner. Teresa remained inside, finishing her makeup and gathering her things for her 9 a.m. shift at Pawfection. At 7:45 a.m., security footage from Teresa's own doorbell camera showed her checking her appearance one final time in the hallway mirror, grabbing her purse and lunch bag, and setting the home security system. She appeared tense but determined as she locked her front door and walked toward her SUV parked in the driveway. The footage showed her scanning the street briefly before continuing to her vehicle, a habitual safety check she had developed in recent weeks. She pressed her key fob to unlock the SUV, the lights flashing in response. Everything seemed normal, routine, safe. What Teresa didn't know was that Franklin had been waiting since before dawn. After driving past her house multiple times during the night, he had parked several blocks away and approached on foot, positioning himself behind a neighbor's parked car with a clear view of Teresa's driveway. According to the medical examiner's reconstruction, Teresa was likely unaware of Franklin's presence until the moment he stepped out, gun already raised. The security camera captured the horrifying sequence in detail. At exactly 7:50 a.m., Franklin emerged from his hiding place as Teresa approached her vehicle. Without a word, he raised a 9mm handgun and fired 5 shots in rapid succession. Teresa turned at the sound, dropping her lunch bag as she desperately tried to reach the safety of her vehicle. She managed to open the driver's side door and partially duck behind it when Franklin fired 5 more shots through the door itself. 2 final shots were fired at close range after Teresa had already fallen to the pavement. The ballistics report would confirm that all 15 shots came from the same weapon, with 10 striking Teresa, 3 in the torso, 4 in the back, 2 in the head, and 1 in the arm. Death would have been almost instantaneous after the head wounds. After the shooting, the footage showed Franklin standing over Teresa's body for several seconds, then calmly walking to the back of her SUV. He opened the rear hatch, removed a bicycle that belonged to Teresa's son, and pedaled away from the scene heading east. The entire incident, from the moment Franklin emerged to his departure, lasted less than 90 seconds, a brief, violent eruption that ended a life and shattered a family. Neighbor Dorothy Mills witnessed the shooting from her kitchen window. "I was washing my breakfast dishes when I heard the first shots," she told detectives, her voice quavering. "I looked out and saw him firing into her car door. I screamed and called 911, but it was so fast. By the time I was talking to the dispatcher, he was already riding away on that bike. I'll never forget the look on his face, so cold, so empty. Like he was taking out the trash, not killing the mother of 2 children." Another neighbor, Theodore Anderson, had been leaving for work when he heard the gunshots. "I dropped to the ground behind my car," he recounted. "When I peeked over the hood, I saw him standing over her, shooting straight down. Then he just walked away, calm as can be, like nothing had happened. I ran to her, thinking maybe I could help, but there was nothing anyone could do." First responders arrived at 7:53 a.m., just 3 minutes after the initial shots, responding to multiple 911 calls from neighbors who heard the gunfire. Despite their quick response, Teresa was pronounced dead at the scene. Her final text message to her sister Karen, sent at 7:49 a.m., remained unsent in her phone, "Heading to work now. See you tonight." As detectives processed the crime scene, Teresa's sons were safely at school, still unaware of the tragedy that had forever altered their lives. The delicate task of notifying them fell to Karen and a victim advocate from the police department. They arrived at the elementary school just before lunch, asking to speak with both boys privately. "How do you tell children their mother is never coming home?" Karen later said, tears streaming down her face. "How do you explain that the man who was in their home, who ate dinner with them, who played basketball with them in the driveway, killed their mother in cold blood? There are no words for that kind of pain." The boys' reactions reflected their ages and personalities. 11-year-old Jamal, old enough to understand the finality of death, collapsed in his aunt's arms, his body racked with sobs. 7-year-old Elijah, confused and frightened, kept asking when he could go home, when he could see his mom. It would take days for the full reality to sink in for the younger child. As the investigation progressed from a search to an apprehension operation, law enforcement resources across the Twin Cities were mobilized to locate Franklin Fox. His photograph and description were broadcast on local news stations, and social media alerts urged the public to report sightings but not to approach the armed suspect. The intensive manhunt continued through the night and into the following day. Officers checked known associates' homes, local motels, and abandoned properties where Franklin might seek refuge. The break came unexpectedly on September 15 when a convenience store clerk in Anoka County, more than 20 miles north of the crime scene, recognized Franklin from news reports and alerted authorities. The clerk, Rajiv Patel, described Franklin entering the store shortly after 6 a.m. to purchase cigarettes and a coffee. He was very calm, not rushing, not looking nervous, Patel recalled. But I recognized his face from the news last night. After he left, I called the police immediately. Officers from the Anoka County Sheriff's Department located Franklin sitting on a park bench near the Mississippi River, still in possession of the stolen bicycle and wearing the same clothes seen in the surveillance footage. He surrendered without resistance, appearing almost resigned to his capture. When officers searched him, they recovered a 9mm handgun that ballistics would later confirm matched the murder weapon. The arresting officer, Deputy Simon Clark, described Franklin as unervingly calm during the arrest. Most suspects show some emotion, fear, anger, relief, something, Reynolds noted in his report. Fox just had this blank look. When I told him he was under arrest for the murder of Teresa Sanders, he simply nodded and put his hands out for the cuffs. No questions, no denials. It was like he was expecting us. During his transport to Minneapolis, Franklin reportedly told officers, "I'm not fighting this. When you read our text messages, you'll understand why I did it." This statement, suggesting that Franklin felt justified in his actions, provided a chilling glimpse into his mindset. He appeared to believe that something in their communications would somehow vindicate or explain his decision to murder Teresa, revealing a profound disconnect from reality and moral reasoning. At police headquarters, Franklin waived his right to an attorney and provided a full confession during his interview with detectives Jackson and Thompson. The interrogation video revealed a man who appeared to feel justified in his actions, frequently referring to messages he believed Teresa had sent to another man. "She disrespected me," Franklin stated flatly. "After everything I did for her and those boys. Then I find out she's seeing someone else, laughing about me behind my back." The evidence Franklin cited, text messages he claimed proved Teresa was involved with another man, turned out to be innocuous exchanges with a male coworker about work schedules. In Franklin's distorted perception, any male interaction represented betrayal, regardless of its actual content or context. When Detective Thompson asked Franklin about the protection order and his repeated violations, he dismissed them as inconsequential. "Those pieces of paper don't mean nothing," he said. "That was between me and Teresa. Nobody else's business." Most disturbing was Franklin's lack of remorse when shown photographs of Teresa's body at the crime scene. "She made her choice," was his only comment. The interrogation continued for nearly 4 hours, with Franklin recounting in detail how he had planned the murder for days. He described watching Teresa's house, learning her routines, and waiting for the perfect moment when her children would be gone. He explained how he had stolen the gun from a friend's house and practiced shooting at an abandoned lot in South Minneapolis. The level of premeditation was staggering, revealing a man who had methodically prepared to end another person's life. "I wanted her to know it was me," Franklin told detectives. "I wanted to look her in the eyes when I did it. I wanted her to understand you don't just throw someone away like trash." By September 16, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office had filed formal charges against Franklin Fox: second-degree intentional murder, illegal possession of a firearm by a prohibited person, and violation of an order for protection resulting in death. At his first court appearance, bail was set at $1 million, and Franklin was remanded to the Hennepin County Jail to await trial. County Attorney Eliza Montgomery addressed the media after the arraignment, emphasizing the seriousness of domestic violence and protection order violations. "This case represents the ultimate failure of our system to protect vulnerable victims," Montgomery stated. We will be reviewing our protocols regarding protection order enforcement and working with law enforcement to identify gaps that allowed this tragedy to occur. As the legal process began its slow march toward justice, Teresa's community transformed their grief into action. A memorial quickly formed at the site of her murder, purple balloons, the color of domestic violence awareness, tied to the fence, photos of Teresa with her sons, flowers, candles, and heartfelt messages. People who had never met Teresa came to pay their respects, moved by the tragic circumstances of her death and the system failures that preceded it. Among the mourners was Lauren Looney, a domestic violence survivor herself, who brought her teenage daughter to leave flowers at the memorial. "I could have been Teresa," Lopez told a local reporter, wiping away tears. "I had a protection order once. It didn't stop him either. I was lucky, I had family in another state I could flee to. Not everyone has that option. The system has to do better." Hands of Hope Resource Center, a local domestic violence advocacy organization, confirmed that Teresa was the 17th intimate partner homicide victim in Minnesota in 2025. The organization's director, Raquel Harold, spoke at a press conference, highlighting the gap between legal protection and actual safety for victims of domestic violence. "A protection order is just paper," Johnson stated. "Without enforcement and consequences for violations, it cannot keep someone safe from a determined abuser." Teresa Sanders did everything right. She documented the abuse, she sought legal protection, she repeatedly called for help. The system failed her, as it fails too many victims. In the days following Teresa's murder, her story resonated across the community and beyond, touching a nerve with domestic violence survivors and advocates nationwide. Local news coverage expanded to national outlets, with Teresa's case becoming a focal point for discussions about the effectiveness of protection orders and the challenges of enforcing them. Teresa's brother, Jack Sanders, established a GoFundMe campaign to support her sons, who were now being cared for by their grandmother. The community response was overwhelming, with donations exceeding $50,000 in the first week. Local businesses, including Pawfection, where Teresa had worked, contributed portions of their proceeds to the fund. "These boys have lost everything," Jack wrote on the campaign page. "Their mother was their world, their provider, their protector. While nothing can fill the void her absence leaves, we want to ensure they have the resources they need for counseling, education, and eventually, college." Teresa wanted nothing more than to give her sons opportunities she never had. The fundraiser quickly exceeded its initial goal, with donations coming from across the country as Teresa's story spread through social media and news outlets. Comments from donors revealed how deeply her story had affected people, particularly other domestic violence survivors who saw their own experiences reflected in hers. "I got out alive. Teresa didn't. This could have been me," wrote one anonymous donor. "Her boys deserve all the support we can give them." At Pawfection, Teresa's workplace, clients and colleagues created a memorial wall covered with photos, cards, and memories. Her grooming station remained untouched, her tools laid out as if she might return at any moment. A sign on the counter announced that a scholarship had been established in Teresa's name to train aspiring dog groomers from disadvantaged backgrounds. "Teresa believed in giving people chances," said salon owner Megan Cobb. "She mentored young groomers, especially single mothers trying to build careers. This scholarship will continue that legacy." On September 20, exactly 1 week after Teresa's murder, more than 150 people gathered at the memorial site for a protest march organized by domestic violence advocacy groups. Wearing purple and carrying photos of Teresa, the marchers proceeded from the crime scene to the Minneapolis 4th Precinct Police Station, their chants of "Domestic Violence Matters" and "No More Teresas" filling the streets. The diverse crowd included domestic violence survivors, community activists, religious leaders, and ordinary citizens moved by Teresa's story. They carried signs with powerful messages: "Protection orders need protection," "Believe women," she reported 7 times, and "The system failed Teresa." Many marchers wore purple t-shirts printed with Teresa's photo and the words, "Her life mattered." At the police station, Karen delivered a powerful speech about the 24 critical days between Franklin's assault on Teresa and her murder, 24 days when intervention might have saved her sister's life. "My sister called for help 7 times in 2 weeks, Karen told the crowd, her voice amplified by a megaphone. 7 times she told authorities she was afraid. 7 times the system let her down. How many times should a woman have to beg for protection before someone takes her seriously?" Karen's voice broke as she continued, "Teresa isn't just a statistic. She was a mother who will never see her son's graduate. A daughter who will never care for our aging mother. A sister I will never laugh with again. A friend, a colleague, a neighbor. A woman with dreams and plans and love to give. And she was the 4th woman in our family to die this way. When does it end? How many more lives will be lost before we fix this broken system?" The crowd responded with chants of "Not one more," and "Justice for Teresa," their voices echoing off the precinct walls. In response to the growing public outcry, the Minneapolis Police Department issued a statement defending their response to Teresa's reports, citing limited resources and the challenges of enforcing protection orders when violations aren't witnessed by officers. The statement prompted further criticism from advocacy organizations, who called for better training for officers responding to domestic violence calls and more resources dedicated to protection order enforcement. Minneapolis Police Chief Christopher John later announced the formation of a specialized unit focused specifically on protection order violations and high-risk domestic violence cases. "Teresa Sanders' death has exposed critical gaps in our response system," Chief Johnson admitted at a press conference. "While we cannot change the past, we can and must learn from this tragedy to prevent future loss of life." State legislators began discussing potential reforms to Minnesota's domestic violence laws, including stricter penalties for protection order violations and expanded authority for police to make arrests based on evidence of violations even if not directly witnessed. These discussions were dubbed "Teresa's Law" by supporters, though any actual legislation remained months away from formal consideration. State Senator Sheila Bryan, who had lost her own sister to domestic violence years earlier, became a vocal champion for reform. "Protection orders are only as strong as their enforcement," Washington argued during a legislative committee hearing. "We need to give law enforcement the tools and the mandate to treat these violations as the serious crimes they are, precursors to potential homicide." The proposed legislation would allow officers to make arrests based on evidence like text messages, photos, or reliable witness statements, even if they didn't personally witness the violation. It would also create a tiered response system with escalating interventions for repeat violators and establish a specialized court docket for protection order cases to ensure more consistent enforcement. Meanwhile, community organizations mobilized to provide additional support for domestic violence victims, recognizing that the legal system alone couldn't solve the problem. Churches and community centers opened their doors as safe meeting places for victims to connect with resources. Volunteer networks formed to provide transportation to court hearings, childcare during legal appointments, and emergency housing options. As autumn settled over Minneapolis, the legal case against Franklin Fox continued to move through the court system. He remained in custody, having made no attempt to post bail. Prosecutors, citing the overwhelming evidence and Franklin's confession, expressed confidence in securing a conviction that would keep him imprisoned for decades. For Teresa's family, especially her young sons, the road ahead was long and painful. 11-year-old Jamal and 7-year-old Elijah were receiving counseling to help them process their mother's violent death and the betrayal by someone who had briefly been part of their family. Teresa's mother, now raising her grandchildren, told reporters that the boys still waited by the window some evenings, expecting their mother to come home from work. "Jamal is angry," Beatrice Sanders said, describing her grandson's grief. "He asks why the police didn't stop this man, why they let his mother die. Elijah still doesn't fully understand. He asked me yesterday when mommy is coming back from heaven. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that she never will?" The boys' school had mobilized support services, with counselors checking in regularly and teachers making accommodations for their grief-affected academic performance. Classmates created cards and memory books, sharing their favorite stories about Teresa from school events and play dates. Jamal, showing maturity beyond his years, had begun speaking at domestic violence awareness events, standing alongside his Aunt Karen to share how violence had impacted his family across generations. "My mom always told me to use my voice for good," the 11-year-old told a hushed crowd at a community center event. "So I'm using it now to say that hurting people you love is never okay. And if someone hurts you, keep telling people until somebody listens." His words, simple yet profound, moved many to tears and became a rallying cry for advocates pushing for systemic change. A video of his speech went viral, garnering millions of views and bringing national attention to Teresa's story and the broader issue of domestic violence. In November, 2 months after Teresa's murder, Franklin Fox appeared in court to enter his plea. Surrounded by sheriff's deputies and wearing an orange jumpsuit, he stood impassively as the charges were read. When asked how he pleaded, he responded simply, "Guilty. I did it." His admission spared Teresa's family the trauma of a trial but left many questions unanswered about how the system had failed to protect her despite her repeated pleas for help. The judge accepted the plea and scheduled a sentencing hearing for January, allowing time for victim impact statements to be prepared. The statistics tell us that Teresa Sanders was one among thousands of women killed by intimate partners each year in America. Protection orders, while an important legal tool, are violated in approximately 40% of cases. And women who leave abusive relationships face the highest risk of lethal violence in the 3 months following separation, exactly the timeline of Teresa's murder after asking Franklin to move out. But statistics cannot capture the full human cost of domestic violence. They cannot measure the void left in a community when a vibrant 34-year-old woman is gunned down in her driveway. They cannot quantify the trauma inflicted on 2 young boys who lost their mother to senseless violence. They cannot calculate the ripple effects through a family already scarred by similar tragedies. In December, the Minneapolis City Council approved funding for a new domestic violence response team, combining police officers with social workers specialized in trauma and abuse. The program, named the Teresa Sanders Initiative, would focus on high-risk cases where protection orders had been violated multiple times or where victims reported threats involving weapons. This approach recognizes that domestic violence requires both immediate law enforcement response and longer-term social services intervention, explained Council member Alicia, who had championed the funding. If this program had existed in September, Teresa might still be alive today. At the state level, Teresa's law continued to gain momentum, with bipartisan support in both houses of the legislature. Senator Washington's committee held public hearings where survivors shared their experiences with protection orders that failed to protect them. Teresa's sister Karen testified, bringing many legislators to tears as she recounted her sister's desperate attempts to secure help in the weeks before her murder. "My sister's voice was silenced forever on September 14, Karen told the committee. But her story continues to speak. I am here to make sure you hear it, and that her death leads to changes that will save others." For those facing domestic violence, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233, provides 24/7 support, safety planning, and resources. Experts emphasize the importance of documentation, support networks, and comprehensive exit plans that go beyond legal protections alone. Domestic violence advocates stress that while Teresa's story ended in tragedy, many victims do escape the cycle of abuse and rebuild their lives. Success often depends on a combination of legal intervention, community support, and personal safety strategies that address the unique dynamics of each situation. The most dangerous time is when leaving an abusive relationship, explained Raquel Harold of Hands of Hope. That's when control is threatened, and violence often escalates. Having a comprehensive safety plan is crucial: secure housing, financial resources, legal protection, emotional support. No one should have to navigate that journey alone. In January 2026, Franklin Fox appeared for sentencing in a packed courtroom. Teresa's family occupied the front row, wearing purple ribbons pinned to their clothing. Behind them sat dozens of domestic violence survivors, advocates, and community members who had rallied around Teresa's case. Before the judge announced the sentence, Teresa's family members were given the opportunity to deliver victim impact statements. Karen spoke first, describing her sister's vibrant spirit, her dedication as a mother, and the void her absence had created in countless lives. "My sister was not just a victim," Karen said, her voice steady despite her tears. "She was a fighter who did everything in her power to protect herself and her children. She was a light in this world, a loving mother, a loyal friend, a dedicated daughter and sister. Franklin didn't just take Teresa's life. He took Jamal and Elijah's mother, my sister, my parents' daughter. He took future birthdays and graduations and weddings. He took all the love she had yet to give, all the lives she had yet to touch." Most powerful was the statement from 11-year-old Jamal, who stood tall beside his grandmother as he addressed the court. "My mom was my hero," he said simply. "She worked hard to give us a good life. She made sure we did our homework and were respectful to others. She taught us to be strong and kind at the same time." His voice broke as he continued, "I miss her every day. I'll never see her again because of what he did. That's not fair." Judge Annette sentenced Franklin Fox to 40 years in prison without the possibility of parole, the maximum allowed under Minnesota law for second-degree intentional murder with aggravating factors. In delivering the sentence, Judge Chen addressed Franklin directly. "Mr. Fox, you took the life of a woman who had done nothing but try to distance herself from your abuse," the judge stated firmly. "You violated the law repeatedly, ignoring a legal protection order and the conditions of your probation. Most disturbing is your complete lack of remorse and your apparent belief that your actions were somehow justified. They were not. No one owns another person. No one has the right to end a life because of wounded pride or a desire for control. The sentence I impose today cannot bring Teresa Sanders back to her family, but it ensures you will never again have the opportunity to harm another woman." As Franklin was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, Teresa's family embraced each other, a mixture of grief and relief evident on their faces. Justice had been served, but the loss remained immeasurable. Outside the courthouse, Karen spoke briefly to assembled reporters. "Today's sentence brings a measure of closure, but our work is far from done," she said. "We will continue fighting for Teresa's law and for all the changes needed to prevent other families from experiencing this kind of tragedy. No protection order should be issued without enforcement. No cry for help should go unanswered." In the months that followed, Teresa's case continued to drive change. Teresa's law passed the Minnesota legislature in March 2026 and was signed into law in April, strengthening enforcement mechanisms for protection orders and providing additional resources for domestic violence prevention and intervention. Teresa's sons began to heal, though their lives were forever altered. Jamal, now 12, established a support group for children who had lost parents to domestic violence. Elijah, 8, found comfort in creating art that expressed his feelings about his mother. Both boys remained close to Teresa's family, surrounded by love and support as they navigated life without their mother. At Perfection, a permanent memorial was established, a mural featuring Teresa's portrait alongside the words she had often shared with new clients: "Every living thing deserves patience, kindness, and a second chance." The Teresa Sanders Scholarship had already sponsored 2 single mothers through grooming school, continuing her legacy of compassion and empowerment. The memorial at the site of Teresa's murder remained, maintained by neighbors and community members who regularly replaced flowers and candles. It had evolved into a space of reflection and commitment, where people came to remember not only Teresa but all victims of domestic violence. Purple ribbons adorned the fence year-round, a visual reminder of lives lost and the work still to be done. Teresa's story had become a catalyst for change, in laws, in systems, in community awareness. Her death had exposed critical failures in how society responds to domestic violence, but her legacy was driving meaningful reform that would protect others facing similar dangers. If this story moved you, help others discover it by sharing this video. Leave a like so others can see this story and gain awareness. And don't forget to subscribe to Guilty Whispers. Together, we can ensure that stories like Teresa's are never forgotten and that justice finds its voice. Teresa Renee Sanders should still be alive. She should be grooming dogs, raising her sons, celebrating birthdays, making plans for the future. She should be here. Rest in peace, Teresa. Your life mattered, your story matters, and your death will not be in vain.